would like to welcome you to our monthly webcast in the VAT Insight series. My name is Diana Kurz. I work at Deloitte in the indirect tax service line Germany. And with me today are Sophie, Chiara, Fabio, Norbert, and also Lucas. Hello to everyone. I'm very happy to have you here. Who are you? What do you do? And what do you think about VAT? In other words, please be so kind as to introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Lucas. I'm a director in Deloitte Germany's VAT practice, and I'm leading the E-Invoicing initiative of Deloitte in Germany. And happy to have so many colleagues here. So please go ahead, Sophie.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sophie van der Marliere. I'm Senior Manager within Deloitte Belgium in the indirect tax practice, and I'm a subject matter expert on e-invoicing and e-reporting.
Chiara.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chiara Tomassetti. I'm a partner in the Italian practice, and I lead the Italian indirect tax team. And I'm here with Fabio.
Good morning. Thanks, Chiara. Good morning, everyone. My name is Fabio Riva, and I am a director in indirect tax department at Deloitte Italy with Chiara. It's a pleasure to be here today and to share Italian side with you. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm the last. Hello, guten Tag. My name is Norbert Wasilewski. I am partner from indirect tax team from Poland, based in Warsaw, and I lead the Polish initiative for e-invoicing and KSF platform, and happy to share with you the details of the Polish mandate today.
Thank you very much. In this virtual summit, we will compare and discuss mandatory structured electronic invoicing, e-invoicing in Germany, Poland, Belgium, and Italy. In addition to setting out the timetables for the introduction of the laws, we will look at the distinguished characteristics of each country's approach and provide practical, commercial, and tax insights to alert you to the upcoming changes and possible pitfalls. Also, the member states have agreed on the framework for the so-called digital reporting requirements, and only a few days ago, the member of the European Parliament overwhelmingly adopted the regulations for the ViDA package. The approaches to national implementation vary as much as the infrastructure and political priorities of each country. Before we start, a note: the webcast will be recorded and can be accessed via our website. Personal data will not be stored. Okay, let's start. And first, for warming up, let's make sure we all have the same understanding of e-invoicing and, in the first step, of an e-invoice. Lucas, what is an e-invoice?
From a German perspective, and here, luckily, we have more or less a common understanding. An e-invoice is an invoice that has been issued, transmitted, and received in a structured electronic format that allows for automatic processing. So in Germany, e-invoicing rules have to be distinguished from e-invoices, have to be distinguished from other invoices. Other invoices are all invoices that are not compliant with the EN 6931. Just a reminder, this EN 6931 will play an important role throughout the next hour. So don't be afraid of any Dutch basis with EN 6931. So all invoices that are not compliant with EN 6931 are regarded as other invoices, like paper or like the standard PDF. So far, so uniform in all countries. So the definition is the same in all countries, but let's start with the rules for Germany specific first.
The priority of paper invoices has thus been cancelled in Germany. Starting 1st January 2025, businesses involved in domestic B2B transactions must be capable of receiving electronic invoices as one issued in a structured electronic format compliant with the European standard, or in a format agreed open by the issuer and recipient, provided it enables the correct and complete extraction of required information in line with this European standard, or is it interoperable with it? Lucas, which formats comply with the criteria for electronic invoices?
In Germany, there are two German local formats, so-called Zugfeld and X-Rechnung. Those are regarded to be compliant with the German formats. In addition, the Federal Ministry of Finance cites the French Facture X or the Babel BIS billing as examples of foreign formats.
What about the Italian Fattura PA?
Fattura PA is, although an e-invoice and structured invoice, not an EN 6931 format, but we come back to that in a second.
I realize that invoices can be created in both a structured and a hybrid format. It is important that the invoice details can be transmitted and read electronically in accordance with German VAT Act. In the hybrid format, the data in XML format is therefore essential. That is, in the event of deviations, the data from the structured part takes precedence. Regarding the EDI procedure, will it still be possible to use it?
Yes. So even from 2028 onwards, EDI is allowed. The only requirement that EDI is interoperable with the European standard. So this means that the further processing of all the VAT relevant data must be more or less identical as it would be with an EN 6931 invoice, so that any loss of information is not possible.
Do affected entrepreneurs have a choice between the permitted formats?
Yes, the format of an invoice and the way to transmit it can be agreed between the parties. So we have here one example of two data points from X-Rechnung, where you see how an X-Rechnung data or how these X-Rechnung data points are structured. So we have business groups, and this business group contains business terms as individual data points. This shows how detailed the information of an invoice must be.
Good keyword. How can the required data be packaged and transmitted in an e-invoice? Which channels are permissible?
The German Federal Ministry of Finance said that sending the data by email, via an electronic interface, download it via specific portals, or a central storage location, or providing access to a central storage location, are all regarded as sufficient.
This is good to know for groups with centralized accounting where invoices are stored in a standardized location. What about the authenticity of the origin and the integrity of the content of the e-invoice?
Authenticity and integrity can be guaranteed or must be guaranteed by internal control procedures. So internal control procedures that must create reliable audit trails between the invoice, the original invoice, unprocessed invoice, and the further trail throughout the company, also the trail with regard to the inbound or outbound service or supply that was provided. So the check of the origin and the content of the invoice must be guaranteed.
Is it still the case that external service providers can also be involved in the transfer?
Yes. Entrepreneurs can use external service providers both for the creation and for the transmission of the invoice. However, it's the obligation of the supplier or of the customer that the external service provider fulfills the formal requirement. So I cannot delegate the content responsibility.
Considering that domestic business will be obliged to be able to receive an e-invoice for the transaction concerned on January 1st, 2025, does the invoice recipient have to provide a separate email inbox for this purpose?
No, one email inbox for regular PDF and e-invoices is sufficient. So this must not be a specific e-invoicing inbox. that is exclusively used for e-invoices. At this point, we would like to give you a little bit more insights. Although the German authorities allow transmission via email, we personally think that the transmission via email is just a temporary solution, and assume that a secure network like PayPal will be the medium-term or long-term solution of choice.
Just with a glance over our shoulder to our Belgian colleagues, right?
Without giving too much away at the moment, Belgium, where I personally think pretty smart, recently made PayPal as the mandatory transmission channel for e-invoices. This is not the case in Germany, and we think that email is not the final solution or the target solution, because IT security concerns are massive when we talk about email.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's get over to the rollout of mandatory e-invoicing, which will be implemented in phases. And I'm sure that Germany is the absolute winner today in this webcast in terms of complexity of the phased introduction of e-invoicing. Lucas, in detail.
Yeah, indeed. So to get an overview, what is to be done when, it's not that easy. So 1st of January 2025 is past, is history. So from now on, every taxpayer must be able to receive e-invoices in Germany in a domestic B2B situation. So in 2025 and 2026, businesses may continue to issue other invoices or electronic formats that are not compliant with EN 6931, as long as they have the recipient's consent. This consent can be even provided implicitly. In 2027, companies with an annual turnover exceeding 800K a year must issue electronic invoices according to EN 6931 or EDI interoperable. And from 2028 onwards, all businesses domestic in Germany must raise e-invoices to other German domestic companies.
Okay, let's have a look to the EU level. The member states have agreed on the framework for the so-called digital reporting requirements in the ViDA package. And only a few days ago, the European Parliament adopted the regulations for this package. Does the German e-invoicing mandate align with the European VAT in the Digital Age initiative?
Yes, it does. In particular, with regard to the adoption of the EN 6931 standard.
Okay. What about the requirement e-invoice data to report directly to the tax authorities?
Currently, or at the moment, Germany does not foresee a transmission of the e-invoicing data directly to the tax authorities on a transaction basis. Such reporting obligation will be implemented at a later stage. And this is a very important differentiator to the other countries here in this webcast. Germany does not have a clearing or transaction-based reporting model at the moment. But we know rumors that such a clearing model should be implemented in the year 2028, something like that.
Okay, one last question. What do you think is the most essential aspect in regard to the e-invoicing mandate in our country?
Get the data right. This is I think the most critical part.
Okay. So let's take a closer look at the Belgian e-invoicing rules. Belgium is preparing to implement a mandatory e-invoicing system for B2B transactions starting January 2026. Sophie, please give us a brief insight. Let's start with the scope of your regulations.
Yeah, happy to do so. And indeed, Diana, as of January 2026, Belgium will be moving to mandatory B2B e-invoicing for domestic transactions. So only for local transactions that are taking place in Belgium, those will be subject to the mandate. Cross-border transactions and also B2C transactions, so transactions with private customers, are currently not in scope. Although, of course, and there was already alluded to it, the scope will be further broadened with intra-EU cross-border and e-invoicing and e-reporting once ViDA will kick in. In the framework of the Belgian mandate, all Belgian established companies will need to be able to send and receive e-invoices. But next to that, and that's a bit strange and atypical if we look at the other countries that are represented here today, our law also foresees currently that non-established, so foreign entities that are having a VAT registration number in Belgium should in principle also be able to receive e-invoices for domestic transactions where they need to communicate their Belgian VAT number to their Belgian supplier. However, this requirement is not aligned with the ViDA proposal that foresees that actually only resident taxpayers may be subject to domestic e-invoicing. So it is likely that the Belgian legislation will still be adjusted at this point. Unlike what we already heard for Germany, Belgium has opted for a Big Bang implementation, so no phased rollout in Belgium, which means that the mandate will become applicable for all taxpayers at once for both sending and receiving obligations. However, the e-invoicing obligation is only a first step in Belgium towards further digitization, since also within Belgium we have a new government and they already decided that we will be moving to near-time reporting as well, likely by January 2028.
Mm-hmm. What are the format specifications for e-invoicing under the Belgian e-invoicing rules?
It was already shortly mentioned. So in Belgium, we will indeed be using PEPL as the default transmission network and the PEPL BIS format as the standard e-invoice format. And of course, although the invoice content will still be determined by the Belgian VAT law, the Belgian VAT regulations, it is important to bear in mind that the fact that we will be using PEPL BIS in Belgium as a standard format also has an impact on the invoice content. For example, additional mandatory fields will need to be filled out in order not to fail the invoice validation in PEPL. So I would recommend to start preparing timely and also be assured that you have an accurate data field mapping exercise when preparing for the upcoming Belgian mandate.
Mm-hmm. How is the submission process handled?
Well, as said a bit already, the invoices will be sent and received via the PEPL network. So important to notice here is that indeed the exchange of e-invoices will still be done directly between supplier and buyer. So unlike Italy, for example, there will be no government interference in the e-invoicing chain. So in Belgium, we will be using a pure interoperability model without any government clearance. In order to be able to exchange your e-invoices via PEPL, you will need to have a so-called PEPL access points that grants you actually access to the PEPL network and allows you that you can interact with other parties that are also known on the PEPL network. So this access point can be facilitated either via a third-party e-invoicing service provider. It's also possible that an access point is embedded in your ERP system. And it is even possible to become your own PEPL access point. So also companies can apply to become their own access point. Although this is an option that we don't often see in practice because it is perceived as a rather cumbersome administrative process. So every taxable person can freely choose its access point, and to help the taxable persons within Belgium, the Belgian tax authorities have already published a list with compliant software solutions on their website. It is already a very extensive list and it is still growing.
Okay, are there any optional provisions we should be aware of?
Yes, I think important to mention here is that in Belgium, we will be having a so-called two-track policy. So the first track is the mentioned default gateway with the PEPAL network and the PEPAL BIS format as a standard format. But it is also foreseen in the Belgian legislation that you can deviate from that standard upon mutual agreement between the contracting parties. So as trading parties, you can agree to use an alternative format, so not a PEPAL BIS format, but another format, on the condition that it complies with the so-called EN 16931 standard. It has been mentioned already, and it will come back a couple of times during this webinar. So this provides a bit flexibility in practice. However, it should be noted that second track should be used with caution, and based on the input of the Belgian tax authorities, the second track is to be used at own risk. So next to that, for the transactions that are not in scope of the mandate, you of course still have the option to voluntarily issue e-invoices, provided that your recipient agrees with that.
If only B2B supplies are covered, how can we ascertain the taxpayer status of the recipient?
Well, in order to issue an e-invoice via PEPAL to your customer, you will need to receive a PEPAL end-user ID from your customer. This is the number with which the recipient is known on the PEPAL network. And in Belgium, the PEPAL authorities, which is the VAT BOSA in Belgium, have already decided that the company number, the company registration number, will be used as a primary identifier. So in Belgium, these company numbers can be retrieved on the Crossroads Bank for enterprises, where also the VAT status is in principle indicated. And of course, then the validity of that VAT number can also still be checked via the VIS website of the European Commission. In case a recipient would be in an exempt category, which is also possible, he needs to inform his supplier thereof. However, as said, also if the recipient is known on the PEPAL network, you can still voluntarily send e-invoices upon his agreement, even for those scenarios that are not captured by the mandate.
Oh, okay. What are the requirements for archiving and the duration for retaining e-invoices?
Well, there actually the law is not changing in Belgium at that point. So the standard archiving requirements remain in place, which means that the standard retention period of 10 years in Belgium also applies for e-invoices. And it is a bit up to the taxpayer to decide how the storage will be done, as long as the requirements are compliant with, and they have been mentioned already, and those requirements with respect to integrity, authenticity, and readability should be guaranteed throughout the entire storage period.
Is there any risk of losing the right to claim input tax in the event of non-compliance?
That's a bit a tricky question because indeed the possession of a VAT compliant invoice is a formal condition for recovering input VAT in Belgium. And indeed, as of 1 January 26, under the Belgian e-invoicing regulation, only that structured e-invoice will be considered as VAT compliant. So unstructured invoices such as PDF or paper will no longer qualify as VAT compliant for those transactions that are falling within the scope of the e-invoicing mandates. So in principle, the authorities might indeed reject the VAT deduction right when you're not in possession of a valid e-invoice. It is also foreseen in the ViDA proposal that member states may indeed impose the possession of an e-invoice as a substantial condition for the VAT deduction right. But there is a bit of a discrepancy with the current ECJ case law, because the ECJ case law currently foresees the economic substance prevails the strict formalities. So until the ViDA legislation becomes applicable, it is a bit to be seen how strict Belgium will enforce these rules. Nevertheless, in practice, we also anticipate an increased scrutiny during VAT audits in this respect.
Another question, can the tax authorities enforce penalties for failing to adhere to e-invoicing regulations?
Unfortunately, yes, they can. So the penalties will be imposed when not being able technically to send and receive e-invoices. These penalties will be outlined in a royal decree that is currently being prepared. So that royal decree still needs to be published. There is also still no target date known here in Belgium. But next to that, what we also know is there are already existing proportional and non-proportional penalties applicable in Belgium for the issuance of incompliant invoices, and they will also be mutually applicable to e-invoices.
Okay, thank you very much for this brief insight. We now come to Poland. Norbert, I'm glad you are here. What is the current status of e-invoicing in Poland? Please give us a brief insight. Let's start with the scope of your regulations.
Plans for Poland, the current ones are that the e-invoicing will go live in 2026. There are 2 dates. February for the bigger taxpayers that have turnover over around 50 million euros, and the smaller taxpayers or mid-sized enterprises below this threshold will go live in April 26, 2 months later. The scope of the mandate covers all the transactions generally in terms of B2B, B2G, and B2C transactions will be covered voluntarily. There were different directions in this area over, let's say, the legislative works, but at the current status, the B2C mandate will be voluntary. And what is important, the transaction covers for B2B and B2C, B2B and B2G, covers all types of transactions, so both domestic ones, but also cross-border transactions like intra-community supplies or exportations. What is important, the mandate concerns the local entities and also foreign entities having fixed establishment in Poland. This means that the entities that are only VAT registered in Poland, not having fixed establishment, will not be required to send the invoices via KSEF. And what is important, they will also not be required to receive the invoice via KSEF, because in Poland, maybe comparing to the other countries, as we heard, the scope of mandate is on the both side, on the purchase and then the sales side, concerns local companies and also those with fixed establishment.
Okay. If only B2B supplies are covered, how can we assert the taxpayer status of the recipient?
Yeah, that is an interesting point. Actually, the Ministry of Finance at the earlier stages of legislation put that fully on the side of the taxpayers. We have something like the white list of taxpayers in Poland where you can double check whether the taxpayer is VAT registered. Currently, the new draft legislation plans for the obligation for the purchaser, if he wants to indicate that it uses certain purchase as a B2B transaction, to actually indicate its tax identification number. So this will be, let's say, pre-assumption that if we have the tax identification number on the invoice, that the transaction is considered B2B.
Okay. Are there any optional provisions we should be aware of?
I would say maybe the one concerning this B2C billing, because as I said, this is the situation and the circumstances where you can use e-invoices voluntarily, and taking into account the discussions I have with the client, having a lot of operation in B2C area, they are really struggling whether what to choose, because on one side, for some of the clients, it's easier to actually use the KSEF billing for all of the invoices and not to assess who is B2B, who is B2C. For other, it may be more convenient to actually cherry pick those B2C invoices in order to let's say to minimize the amount of the invoices that are sent to KSEF, and obviously the data that is shared with the tax authorities with this format. Secondly, the issue of the foreign entities, because as I said, they are not covered by obligatory mandate, but of course, again here the optional use of KSEF will be also possible. So those with not having fixed establishment.
Mm-hmm. Can you say something about the format specification for e-invoices under the Polish e-invoicing rules?
Yeah. So Poland, it's quite different from the other countries we have today on the call, because the Poland does not go at this point with the route of EN standard. So in Poland we have homegrown schema for the e-invoice. So we have that there is currently the draft of third version of the e-invoicing schema. It covers around 400 fields. Obviously, not all of the fields are obligatory, and there is, I would say, quite significant exercise for the taxpayers to work on actually this deviation from the EN standard, especially having a couple of jurisdictions to be covered. So Poland will need to have, so to say, specific treatment in the area of data and mapping, of course.
Very interesting. In regard of the submission process, how it is handled?
Yeah, so in Poland we have the platform to which the invoices will be sent. It's called KSEF, and the platform will act as the intermediary between the seller and the purchaser. So the seller will be creating the invoice in its tax system, or ERP system, and send the invoice to KSEF, which will be received by the purchaser there. Upon sending the invoice to KSEF, the system indicates and issues so-called KSEF number, which confirms that the invoice is received and accepted by the platform. And as of this moment, it will be considered as put into legal circulation and may be uploaded by the purchaser. What is important, the KSEF will not perform very sophisticated tests in terms of, let's say, correctness of the invoice. Only the semantic verification will be performed, the authorization to issue of the invoices. So it will be on the taxpayer's side to make sure that the invoices are issued correctly. And what is important for the purchaser that are not obliged to use the KSEF. So as I mentioned, those that are not VAT registered, so for cross-border transactions or for domestic transaction, but where the purchaser does not have fixed establishment and will not be obliged to receive the invoice via KSEF. So apart from sending the invoice via the system, via the platform, the taxpayer will be also obliged to send separately outside of the system also visualization of the KSEF invoice to make sure that the recipient receives it.
What are the requirements for archiving and duration for retaining e-invoices in Poland?
So system will enable possibility of storage of the invoices. The timing for storage will be 10 years. Which is quite long time, I would say, because the statute of limitation in Poland, it's 5 years. So if you are not using certain fixed assets, pro rata calculation, where potentially the correction period may be 10 years, so it will extend the statute of limitation period. If for other reasons, or I don't know, some kind of donations or this pro rata, the need for storage of the invoices will exceed 10 years, then the taxpayers will be obliged to store them independently. And obviously, currently also we have a lot of discussions with the client in terms of possibility or necessity to storage the invoices outside of the system as a backup. There is no requirements in this respect, but in a lot of conversation I have, there is the will from a lot of taxpayers actually to store and have the backup, especially when the system will be novelty in the Polish tax law system.
Is there any risk of losing the right to claim input tax in the event of non-compliance?
I would say any is like, very strong word. So obviously there is sometimes risk. There were historically there was significant risk, I would say, because we have the definition of the electronic invoice and the invoice itself, which was the invoice sent via KSEF or via platform. Currently, the legislator resigned for this situation from this solution. So it is on the purchaser side, I would say the risk will be lower. But we will see, let's say, where the practice go and whether apart from the legislation that indicates that still that there will be no responsibility for the purchaser in respect of, let's say, how the invoice is set, as long as the invoice is received. But potentially the practice may differ. So I wouldn't underestimate the risk here, but I would say the legislative solution is quite favorable for the purchasers.
Okay. Can the tax authorities enforce penalties for failing to adhere to e-invoicing regulations?
Yes, there are penalties. So this will be definitely on the seller side to make sure that they are issuing the invoices properly, and that the penalties are quite significant, because these are generally equal to 100% of the amount that it's shown on the invoice. So if you will issue the invoice outside KSF, generally the VAT that is on that kind of document potentially may be the maximum penalty applicable. For VAT exempt transaction, for cross-border transaction where you do not have VAT, still the penalties apply, and this penalty will be calculated under assumption that generally 23% VAT is calculated in that kind of invoice using the calculation in 100. So meaning that, let's say, the penalty can be 18.17%, so also quite significant. What is important is there are specific emergency modes. So, for example, if there is downtime from either platform or the taxpayer has some kind of emergency in his own system, there are specific possibilities to withhold from issuing the invoices via KSF for certain periods of time until the failure is fixed. But still, the legislation provides that in the majority of situations that you are still after this emergency need to upload the invoice to the system. So, of course, this also needs to be followed and remembered by the taxpayer, bearing in mind these significant penalties amounts.
Okay, thank you very much, Norbert. Chiara and Fabio, nice to see you and have you with us. Fabio, can you give us an insight into the Italian regulations on e-invoicing?
Thank you, Diana. Yes. In Italy, actually, it is mandatory the electronic invoice for the B2B transaction, B2C transaction, and B2Z transaction. In particular, the transaction toward public administration was introduced in 2014, and the extension of the electronic invoice for B2B and B2C has been introduced in 2019. In the last years, the electronic invoice is already extended for the cross-border transaction that are subject to transmission to SDI system, and also the electronic invoice is mandatory for the micro business, where initially was excluded from this obligation. The foreign taxpayer that have not established entity in Italy but have a ID number, in particular a direct identification or VAT representative in Italy, are excluded from electronic obligation, but can opt, is a faculty for them to use the electronic invoice if they want. Therefore, all the transaction performed by a established taxpayer in Italy for all type of transaction, domestic transaction, foreign transaction, the electronic invoice is mandatory. Mandatory also to exercise the deduction of the VAT. Therefore, all the transaction should be transmitted to SDI system, is the portal managed by Italian tax authority by the XML file.
Okay, so if B2B and B2C transaction are covered, we don't have to verify the recipient status of the recipient, the taxpayer status. Is that correct?
Yes, let me say it's mandatory to issue an invoice. I mean XML file, to SDI system, to report the XML file in the specific field the ID identification, VAT number of the taxpayer if the client is a business entity, or the fiscal code in the case is the consumer. Therefore, the supplier should verify, should have a VAT number or the fiscal code to issue the electronic invoice.
Mm-hmm. Are there any optional provisions in Italy we should be aware of?
Let me say, there are not particular optional, actually, no? As mentioned before, the optional is only for the foreign entity that are not established in Italy, no? Therefore, they can opt for this fulfillment.
Okay. In regard of the format specification for e-invoiced, what are these under the Italian e-invoicing rules?
Yes, as mentioned before, the format is to transmit and receive the electronic invoice is the XML file. On the basis of a specifically technical provision issued by Italian tax authority, where are detailed the specific fields and how this field should fill out. Obviously, it's possible to attach further format, further the file to XML file if the taxpayer want, but it is mandatory to follow the technical specification to prepare the XML file.
And maybe once again, how is the submission process handled? You did, but
yes, this is important in Italy, that the electronic invoice should be transmitted and received by SDI system, no? The system managed by Italian tax authority. This is important, as mentioned before, to consider issued an invoice and to consider received, and therefore to exercise the deduction of the VAT, no, for the recipient of the invoice. It's possible to communicate with SDI system through different way. One way is the PEC, the other way is as the FTP service or as the COP services, or also use the website, and therefore means to enter in the website of the Italian tax authority in a specific area called fatture corrispettivi, where there is a direct connection with SDI system. Therefore, this is the process, let me say. Obviously, once transmitted the XML file, therefore, I mean the electronic invoice to SDI system, the SDI system perform some formal technical check related to the XML file received, and if the check are the results of this check is fine, is okay, the SDI system transmit this file, XML file, therefore, directly to the recipient indicated by the supplier. Okay.
Okay. And it is correct that for archiving and duration for retaining e-invoices must be digitally archived in compliance with the e-archiving regulations for 10 years, correct? Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. The XML files should keep in electronic archiving under a specific regulation and specific technical requirements, and I mean timestamp and digital signature, to guarantee the authenticity, etc., no, of this file, and should keep archived for 10 years. This time is generally statutory duration, statutory limitation for the civil and tax perspective.
Okay, just 2 questions left, and we have to hurry up a little bit. Is there any risk of losing the right to claim input tax in the event of non-compliance?
Yes, this is a very good point. Obviously, the case we don't receive the XML file by SDI system in directly through our channel, the VAT is not deductible. Therefore, this is a frequently problem, in particular for the intracompany where the registration of the invoice are done on the basis of the ERP system, and the flow of the SDI system is not considered. Therefore, this point is important, and to pay attention to receive the XML file by SDI system.
Can the tax authorities enforce penalties for failing to adhere to e-invoicing regulations?
Yes. For example, in the case the XML file or a PDF is issued and don't meet the technical specification, or not issued and transmitted to SDI system, the penalty, the irregularity is considered as omitted invoice, and the general penalty is 70% of the VAT due. Therefore, it's important to issue the XML file to SDI system, and in the other hand, the omitted receipt of the XML file by SDI system is the same penalties is applicable for undue deduction of the VAT on the purchase.
Okay, thank you to all of you for presenting the regulations in your countries. Looking at the clock, I would like to open the discussion where you can share your valuable insights and practical experience with e-invoicing projects. Let's start with Italy. You have much experience in e-invoicing, as Italy is live with e-invoicing since 2019. What are the top 3 mistakes you saw when e-invoicing was implemented?
Yes, thank you, Diana, for this question. It's really interesting. I think for a country where the electronic invoicing has very recently introduced or is going to be introduced. So this is really the experience we had. The top 3 errors. First one, Fabio was mentioning, there is a mandatory form. So you should respect some requirements in terms of, size of the file, length of some fields, data to be mentioned according to a specific format in all the fields that you need to populate. And so this was at the beginning really the first error, not being fully compliant with all these requirements. Second errors, all the ones pertaining to the transmissions. So if the channel is not well working, if you do not receive the receipt from the SDI, the portal of the tax authorities, that confirm that the invoice has been duly and successfully delivered to the customer. I mean, there is a process, of course. There are many steps, many types of receipt in order to consider the invoice issued or the invoice only delivered and kept, for example, in a special area where the customer should access and download. I mean, all these types of technical problems linked with the channel used to transmit and receive the invoices. Third, very big error, the one that Fabio mentioned at the end of his intervention, the recovery of an input VAT based on a document that could not be seen as a proper valid VAT invoice. The example Fabio did is something that really very often we saw in Italy in intercompany transaction, or for example, transaction involving local branches. It is very common that the EIP of the group post an invoice, and since the supplier and the customer belong to the same group, there is an automatic posting on the supplier side, on the customer side, and the customer automatically recover the input VAT. But if the invoice is not passed through the system of the tax authorities, the recovery is not legitimate, of course. These are the main three errors, which now I think, everything has been more or less solved because we had time, of course, in all these years past. Yeah.
Thank you very much. To all of you, it appears that e-invoicing requirements will be implemented by many European jurisdictions in 2025 and 2026. How do you think multinational organizations can manage implementations across these jurisdictions effectively?
Yeah, so this is a quite important topic, bearing in mind that in 2026 we have, I currently stopped the calculating at 6 jurisdictions. So because we have, apart from the countries we have also Slovenia, Croatia, and there is also, I believe, Latvia. So there is like 6 jurisdictions that go live in 2026. So it's very important actually indeed to seek for the synergies. So verify, let's say, what processes may be similar in different jurisdictions, to perform some blueprint analysis, how this process is, what it's, let's say, similar in terms of the tax processes, accounting processes, business processes as well. And then based on that, to perform this analysis maybe only once, then only perform the enhancement in the particular countries, and also how these particular processes translate into the obligations in the particular jurisdiction. Because probably in number of cases, there may be some similarities in terms of, I don't know, documenting advance payments or correction invoices, but on the other hand, definitely there will be peculiarities, especially bearing in mind my experiences. For example, the corrections are not, in a sense, nightmarish to a lot of taxpayers, and they really are working differently in different jurisdictions, especially for, let's say, more complex businesses, manufacturing or retail, when there is a lot of lines on the invoices, collective correction invoices, that kind of things. They may work differently in different jurisdictions, and as a result, also working with third-party providers, because we see that a lot. I have a lot of projects with the providers like Edicom, Pagero, Sovos, and you name the others, which cover a lot of different jurisdictions. So of course they give a great flavor to and possibility for the clients, for the taxpayers to seek also for the synergies having the tool. But what is important in terms of, let's say, the standardization are also these local peculiarities. So definitely having local team, or if you do not have, or the clients do not have the local teams, to have the local advisor on board also to verify this local specific, and sometimes even to maybe a little bit like, push, put the needle there, and to actually maybe even sometimes even challenge this IT providers a little bit, bearing in mind, let's say, what is required in the country specifics, or either what may be even like the best practice in the country specifics.
Mm-hmm. What we also see or expect, because in Germany we are live for 2 months now, and we see that the EN standards and the local implementations are also not final yet. So EN 6931 was developed for B2G transactions, but is not suitable to the very different B2B transactions. We have a lot of questions who say, we are just missing some information. So it's not only the law or the jurisdictions where e-invoice will come up, it's also that the invoice format will develop rapidly in the next few years.
Yeah, the last time I checked the EN standard on the site, it was like around 40 types of documents that meet EN standards. So what it's important to stress is that Zugfertigungsrechnung and a couple of others are only like the standards within the standards. So this is not like, even when we will have ViDA, it's important to remember that we will not have like one format of the invoices that will fit everything and all the jurisdictions. So yeah, that's also important to remember.
I think much is said about the challenges associated with e-invoicing, organizational, legal, technical, but it also represents major opportunity for automation and streamlining of financial processes. How do you think taxpayers can leverage it to the maximum?
Well, I think the fact that indeed, like at least also in Belgium, we will be using a set of standardized data will allow you for further automation and then processing your transactional data even faster. Also, the fact that you will be issuing e-invoices is way quicker than when you need to create a PDF and send it via mail. So, which will also result likely in a quicker payment of these invoices. So that's also an advantage in terms of cash flow, of course, but also on the incoming side. What we are currently seeing is also that the e-invoices are causing like an opportunity to also scrap certain steps in the traditional inbound processes, like for example, OCR scanning is something that will become redundant going forward. So we really see indeed like efficiencies going forward that can both inbound and outbound trigger a quicker process.
If I may add to that, from my experience, I've seen that, let's say, two logics from the clients that are actually implementing the process. One group, it's the group that actually want to see the mandate and see that as a purely compliance obligation, at least for the starters. But I have also clients that already for the very beginning, they started to look how the ingestion, what Sophie mentioned, that how that's entire, especially AP process look like and how to leverage on that. And what is important, I had number of projects where within that, for example, the client, withdrawn from the number of different processes, even resigning from different tool to find the efficiency that it's actually taking into that it's enabled by the fact that the invoice format will be structured.
Yeah. What is your impression about the planned new VAT rules that are part of the ViDA package, especially relating to digital reporting requirement and e-invoicing? What are the benefits and challenges of the upcoming VAT amendments on the EU level, and how will they affect the e-invoicing landscape in your country?
Surely for Italy. Oh, sorry, Sophie.
We're both eager to answer. I will be very quick, Chiara, because actually in Belgium we notice already an impact of the upcoming ViDA legislation because of the fact that the Belgian regulations, as said, is currently not aligned with what is in ViDA. In Belgium, it is foreseen that non-established entities should be able to receive e-invoices, but it's not in line with what is in the ViDA. So Belgium will likely have to adjust its legislation at that point. So from a country perspective, I can indeed confirm that we are already impacted by the upcoming ViDA.
Mm-hmm. Yes, no, I think it will be a challenge, of course, for Italian tax authorities and for Italian operators now they are so calm and relaxed because it is more, I would say 10 years that they are familiar with the process and they would need to change at least a little bit to be fully compliant. But I think the Italian authorities will be really strong. They had been when they decided to introduce the electronic invoicing mandate without any kind of postponement, any kind of derogation, and they expanded as we heard from Fabio telling us the story. So I think they will be really strong. Italy has been a pioneer even in introducing not only the mandate for tax purposes, but also PEPPOL in public procurement. So they will surely be online and very soon. I think they are already working to be. So new changes will come.
Yeah, also from a German perspective, definitely the transaction-based reporting model will have an impact. So I'm curious whether Germany moves faster than the ViDA proposal or whether they are awaiting for further clarifications from ViDA. But this will be a very significant impact on the German rules to be expected.
Here, one last question, please. When talking to our cybersecurity experts, we see that they have concerns on automated processing of e-invoices. What do you think about it? Anybody?
Well, I think there maybe Diana, it depends on the type of solution, I think, in the first place, but also the type of model that you will be using. Like, for example, here in Belgium, we will be indeed, as said, leveraging PEPL, which has some certainties with respect to security and certain risk policies. To that extent, and maybe also for the information of the audience, the Belgian authorities had initially the idea to foresee like a kind of a platform for taxpayers where they will be able to receive and send invoices in a structured format, in a PEPL BIS format, where you then receive a email notification that indeed your invoice has, for example, been made available on that platform. But there was a they were worried about the fact that indeed like those email messages can be brought to fraud and phishing, which is actually also the reason why now the tax authorities in Belgium have decided to likely discontinue that platform.
Okay, thank you very much. One last, I'm sorry. Chiara, from an Italian point of view, what evolution do you foresee in control and automation systems?
I mean, we already experienced this evolution. Consider that Italy introduced a system of pre-filling of VAT return, VAT payment forms, because thanks to the portal of the tax authorities, the data gathered electronically, not only via invoices, but also there are other sources, Intrastat, but also daily consideration that are transmitted by those taxpayers not obliged to issue invoices. So tax authorities are pulling together all this data. And so I'm coming back to the first point that Lucas raised before, the quality of data is essential because they are gathering your data, using them to produce VAT compliance reporting on your side. Of course, you have the chance to change and to discuss with them, but they had in their hands plenty of data coming from the company. So the evolution is automation also from the tax authority side, automation of controls. Consider that the VAT gap in Italy from 2020 to 2021 reduced by an half, from 26 billion to 14 billion in only 1 year. And so this is really an impressive, I think, point. No? The evolution is to automate for reducing frauds and enhancing the efficiency of control, and this will surely come.
Yes. Okay.
So, last words, Diana, or shall I close it? we stress. We have. I think we could continue for hours because it's a very. Everybody of us has so much experience to share. We stress the patience of our attendees already a little bit. Glad that so many are still here. So thanks, Sophie, Norbert, Fabio, Chiara, and Diana for sharing your insights, for contributing here. If you have any questions, just feel free to reach out to us, either to Diana or directly to the colleagues. The recording will be available on the website. Also the slide deck. There are some slides we have not shown yet today, but I think they're relevant for providing a little bit more in details. So thanks to our attendees for participating, and glad you were here. And you see, e-invoicing keeps interesting, keeps us busy, and beyond cross borders. And thank you, everybody. Talk to you soon, and hopefully see you soon.
If you want to register for our newsletter, please see the presentation. There you can get it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye everybody.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.